Hello, my name is Kelly Shucker, and for my final for LAI 687, I chose to do a research proposal, mostly in preparation of beginning to think about my dissertation. So this is an ethnography of a poetry slam, how slam poetry might subvert grand narratives. So tonight I'm going to show you my general abstract, my research context, research questions, my methods, data collection and analysis for my plan. To begin with my abstract. Through my research, I am interested in conducting an ethnography of a poetry slam competition. Slam poetry is a spoken word competition that focuses on the power of poetry as performance, which emphasizes the importance of wordplay, intonation and inflection, body movement and gesture, and how all of these work together collectively and simultaneously in a performance. Through my research, I am interested to see the ways in which slam poetry functions to subvert cultural and societal norms. For this examination, I will be conducting a discourse analysis of a poetry competition that is performed at a monthly spoken word event that is held locally here in Buffalo, New York. So my research context. Slam poetry competitions are an ideal venue to observe the literacy practices of a diverse representation of people from various races, ethnicities, genders, sexualities, and abilities, specifically looking outside of a formal academia context. I am considering the ways in which populations of people who are marginalized from the academic mainstream, namely those who are non-white and not middle or upper class, engage in literacy that is outside of a classroom setting. My research questions. These are just a couple questions that I've sort of played around with quite a bit and drafted out, and I would be especially excited to hear any possible critiques or ideas if you guys have anything else I could add or change for these. I'm looking at how can literacy skills be used to challenge and subvert the discourses we are socialized into, and how do stories, especially those told by marginalized people, function to challenge grand narratives. Methods. My data collection will be taking place during a single slam poetry competition event. Specific information regarding data collection analysis on the next slide. Data collection, an observance of a poetry slam competition. Video recordings from each poet performance with each poet's permission. Transcriptions of all of this video data, which includes the transcription of each poem itself, as well as all of the other filler and talk that happens during a slam poetry competition, mostly by the MC who is leading the event. Interviews with willing poets and audience members, which will also be transcribed. And ideally, I would like to obtain any possible original copies of performer poems. For data analysis, I hope to do an open coding of transcription data regarding the poems and the interviews separately. Thematic coding on transcription data of poems and interviews also separately. I will be looking at themes across, I think across the poems themselves, and thematic coding across the interviews themselves. And then I will be looking at to see if there are any parallels or overlaps between the interviews and the poems in terms of theme. I also will be conducting a multimodal analysis of the video data, where I'll be looking at the body gestures and movements, enunciation, inflection, etc. of the poets from the film in conjunction with my transcripts. And also I hope to do a comparison between the original written poems and the poems as they are performed to see any possible differences or shifts that happen between when a poet actually creates their work and when they perform it. Some of my interview questions. I would like to interview both the poets who are performing as well as some willing audience members. So My interview questions for the poets: describe a slam poetry competition in your own words. What initially made you interested in slam poetry competitions? What is your inspiration for writing? What is your goal in writing and performing your poetry? And what is your favorite poem performed tonight and why? For the audience, some of the questions overlap a little bit to see if I can find any themes between the poets and the audience in terms of perspectives. So for the audience, I will have them describe a slam poetry competition in their own words. Ask if this is the first event they have ever attended. Do you write or perform poetry yourself? What was your favorite poem performed tonight and why? What purpose do you think slam poetry might serve? And do you think these slam poetry events do anything to serve the community? Theoretical framework. I hope to analyze my data through a Bakhtinian lens, where I intend to examine the ways in which the carnivalesque presents in spoken word poetry as social norms and expectations are typically suspended in this space. Bakhtin's concept of the carnival is a celebration of liberation from the established order, a challenge to hierarchical rank, privileges, norms, and prohibitions. A lot of these things I also see happening in the slam poetry realm as well, so I'm hoping to compare and contrast some of Bakhtin's theories, particularly his idea of the carnivalesque, in application to not just poetry, but this concept of the slam poetry competition. Bakhtin continues to talk about carnivalesque as spaces that are designed to provide space to shift and challenge established and sustained power structures in society and associated inequalities and inequities of gender, race, socioeconomic status, religion, sexuality, and other diversities. So I will be using a Bakhtinian lens to analyze my data and to conduct this research. My next steps. I am currently sifting through ethnographic studies that have been conducted on performance poetry to get a sense of exactly where my future study will be fitting in this field. I welcome any and all feedback. I'm especially interested, as I mentioned earlier, in any helpful comments or critiques regarding my research questions, and anything else you guys might have to add for me. Thank you.